Hey guys, welcome back to Honoring God. I'm Laura. Today we're going to talk about listening to Jesus. It has been about a year since the pandemic started, and in that year we have been up and down, crying, laughing, starting, stopping, changing every day, especially at the beginning. And I want to say none of this was really outside God's plan. Like, this has always been the plan. God is still on the throne. And I can't believe that all of this hasn't been for a purpose. I say that with a grain of salt, knowing that there are, over 400,000 people that have died from this. And I don't want to discount that at all. It is very sad and very tragic. And I pray every day that the coronavirus will go away and we can go on to a different stage of life. But I want us to look back over the last year, especially during Lent right now, when we have the chance to, in this season of the church, to sit and listen and look back and look ahead and just talk to God. So that's what I want you to do during Lent. During this time, is just really ask God some questions and then wait expectantly for his answer, because I think that we have learned quite a bit that we just haven't digested, that will serve us going forward in Easter and beyond. So here's what I want you to ask God. Okay, so first, think and talk to God about what have I learned, or what has God taught me over the last year. And I want you to write down everything that you have learned over this last year. We are looking back, we're remembering what God has done. I think we've talked about this before in one of our videos. There are Jewish holidays that is what they were doing. They're looking back, remembering what God has done, and celebrating his faithfulness. And so I want you just to look back, because we'll celebrate his faithfulness in Easter, right? Right now, I want you to look back and see what God has done. So, and everything, write down everything, even if it doesn't seem significant. I have learned that, I think I knew this before, but I have learned that red vines do not last more than a day in my house. It doesn't matter the size of the package, you guys. I can't handle it. So I have learned, once again, in the pandemic, just not to buy them. It's not a good answer, or not a good thing. So just be still. Ask and then listen to what God says. Also, second question, where have you seen God already at work pre-pandemic and during? So I was watching a podcast with a couple ministry leaders, and they were talking about how they had already put plans in place to do these after school gatherings where they were going to bring all of these families and children together. And then of course that was closed. That idea was lost during the pandemic, and it's still not there for them yet. And so I take that to God, things like that, things in your ministry, in your family, take that to God and say, God, is this something that the door has closed on? Or is this something that time wasn't right, and now that we have these seeds in place, we need to prepare for the next stage where we can put some of these things in place, or put them in place differently than we had thought before. That is in your own home as well. Maybe you had planned, for this in your job, or to move, or to whatever, and either got to sped that up or has taken that away altogether. Has he closed the doors? Where has he opened the doors? What is God already at work doing in your life? Okay. Question 3. Think and pray very carefully about where your response to what has happened might be getting in the way. I know that can feel harsh, for sure. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. I had a sermon that I was listening to on Sunday, and the pastor was talking about Peter up on the mountain with Jesus when Elijah and Moses came down in Mark, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But he said, there's so many times that we get in our own way. We get in the way of God. When God is trying to do something, we're like, oh, hold on. I think I know better. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But have you responded to the problems that are happening out of necessity and urgency, and in your own strength? Or have you and are you ready to lean in and trust God and what God has called to happen, what God has called to happen through it? We may have talked about this before, but I sat down on a plane on the way home from a conference. It was very much a crossroads moment for me. I was getting on a plane, which I despise. I don't like to fly. It makes me feel very out of control, and it's high, and I don't like it. This gentleman sat down next to me, and I call him Angel Sean. This was a couple years ago, but I call him Angel Sean because he just at that moment spoke life into me and where I was. At that moment, he happened to be an air traffic controller, and so he could sit down also and say like, oh, that's just the wheels coming up, or that's this adjusting and the this adjusting, and like help me to understand like where I was in space. But also life. Like he just spoke very with God's words over me. And one of the things he said that I'll remember is he's talking about marriage and who has the wheel, who has the driver's wheel during that moment in your marriage. So thinking about my marriage, we moved away to a different city because of my husband's job. And he very much was in control of that situation. Like at that moment, I was along for the ride for that 2 years. And then there was a point after 2 years that I was like, I really want to go back. And so then all of a sudden I have become the driver, of that car. Like, I want to go back. I'd like to make this happen. Here's how we can do these things. Always in agreement, for sure. Like, he was definitely in agreement. I'm not just going to take the wheel and run. But here's what I'm saying to you is who is driving your car? We've heard that song, like, Jesus, take the wheel, but do we need to make Jesus forcibly take the wheel? Or can we just let it happen? Not let it happen even, like surrender the wheel to him. So this week in Dallas, there was a big pileup of cars on the interstate. And I was talking to a friend that lived down there, and he had moved from the north, and I'm more northern. And, we growing up in this environment, when you're 16, 15, however, like as you're learning to drive, you are learning to drive on the ice and snow. Like you do it, you have to do it because you have to get to places you need to go, right? And so we were talking about the differences of, like people driving on the ice and snow who don't normally do it and how they react. Because what you want to do when you are sliding on the ice, you have the wheel, you want to turn away from where you're sliding, right? And that's not the case. When you're sliding, you have to turn into the slide and then turn back away. And the same, like if you totally lose control and you are spinning, our first inclination is to take control. Like we need to take control of the situation. We need to steer it to get us out of this spin. And that's not the case. And what you're supposed to do is just let go, which feels totally wrong. When everything is going wrong and it's out of control and it's scary, you're just supposed to take your hands off the wheel and let the car right itself, right? Like that is what I'm talking about in letting Jesus take the wheel. Like it's not just like, you take it from me. Like, I know, God, that you need to take it. So you just take it white-knuckled, holding on to the wheel. It's, God, this is yours. You are on the throne. You are good. You are mighty. This wheel is yours. The wheel of my life is yours. So we have to let go. And we have to lean into what God is doing. Listen to him. Follow him. So let go of the steering wheel for a minute during Lent and get your bearings. Ask God, where am I getting in the way? What am I not listening to? What is our next step? What have you already shown me? All of these things. And then wait expectantly. I want you to read scripture. I want you to fast if you choose. I listen to God and be ready to receive all of it. Like that's what we're called to do in Lent, right? We are called to fast, to give something up, to sit and listen and be with God. So yeah, I'm giving you just specific directions. Try it. Just try it. Okay? And see and write down what God says. From this sermon that I was talking about before. So Mark 9:5. Let me read it here for you. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here." Okay, so this is when Jesus takes them up on the mountain. Moses and Elijah come down and meet them on the mountain. And Peter pipes up, when all of this is happening. He says, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And then in parentheses it says, "He did not know what to say. They were so frightened." Peter, in fine Peter fashion, and in, I'm sure what is Laura fashion as well, is like, "Oh, everyone is here. I know what to do. I have got it. I know what to do. Jesus, we are going to build these shelters and you're just going to stay here and it's going to be amazing." And he gets the rebuke of a lifetime, okay? So like right after that, the next verse, it says in 9:5, "Then a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and a voice came from the cloud. 'This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him.'" Like, can you imagine Peter like walking back down that mountain? Like how that had to have felt. Like this is not your mom leaning over in the pew and being like, "That's enough. You need to listen to what, the pastor is saying." This is God himself speaking to you, saying, "Listen up." Listen to Jesus, right? Like I can't imagine how that would have felt. And God Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Peter, shush it and listen. And so I'm asking you, and I'm asking myself too, like over the next week, and of Lent in general, but specifically over the next week, because we want to start up that rhythm for ourselves. Listen, read your scriptures, sit and listen. And I invite you to write it down too. Write down what you're hearing from all the 4 questions we talked about and whatever else God has put on your heart. Write it all down. We'll come back and we'll talk about it next week. But I would love to hear, in the comments, what God is telling you, what God is saying to you in your life, in your work, in your family, all of that. So for the next week, let go of the wheel. Listen to God. You guys are amazing. I can't wait to hear what you have to say and what God has to say to you. Talk to you later.